The second most important thing I would say is the fifth. So if you're playing an E, let's say, you could play root, fifth, octave. So and so it's amazing to think of how many different patterns can be created, even with just a few notes. Like if I start my little drum pattern and just take the root, the fifth, and the top octave, and you can keep on inventing. Just because you're only using like 2 notes in this case doesn't mean you can't be very creative and even imply different styles. The next interval I'd like to bring into the picture is the 7th. So in E, we're going to take the low E, a D, and an E. Now let's add that with the 5th. We're basically starting to outline a pentatonic scale. But just with those notes now, we can get effects like this. It would be great to get a rhythm going now that we've already discussed rhythm, and actually try your hand at looping a bass line, creating something that would go for like 2 measures, and then without stopping the count, to go on and create a different pattern. Something like this. So you would, and again, now do something else. Now something else. This kind of practice would be very helpful and also help with your improvisational skills. Let's look at what I consider to be like the next most important interval in creating a bass line, which is the 4th. So in E, you would play an A. The interesting thing about this whole thing is that you'll notice that I started out by showing you the intervals that were most spread out. On any instrument that's playing in a low register, you'll want to have the intervals spread out. It's kind of like if you take a piano sound and you would play a chord like down here. I mean, certainly it's been done in some Beethoven stuff where he just plays a very thick chord. But in most music, most popular music especially, what happens is that the low register will be actually spread, whether it's a piano sound where I'd be playing like root, 5th, and then the 10th, or a bass sound where as I said, the octave would be the most important thing. So then as you're getting more busy in the bass, you could add the extra notes. So now let's add the 3rd to it, the minor 3rd, E, G. So our notes are E, G, A, B, D, and E. And I would say we have pretty much a complete palette of notes to really do a lot of things. So again, what I recommend is start your drum groove, and take a tempo that you can continue making up a bass line, and just get something for 2 measures, and then without stopping, change it to the next idea that you have. Take a look at this whole walking bass idea. It's a little bit different than the rock approach. In this approach, it's called walking bass because it simply does that. And we have to examine the term first, I think, to understand what should happen. Basically, in this bass line, there's a definite direction the whole time you're playing. And the walking idea is usually constructed by playing almost in a scalular fashion, like. But where are you walking to? That's the whole consideration. Let's say we've got a G-type blues progression, and we're going to take 8 beats, like, till we get to C. So you figure you've got 4 beats to kind of linger around G. And in that case, you don't have to be so concerned with the way you're going to slide into C for the first 4 beats. So you could. But after that, you've got to really approach your C. So let's walk at that point to the C from where I am. So what happens while I'm improvising, and what I started out with was totally an improvisation, is that I let it flow for the first 4 beats, and I see where I am in that improvisation, and then walk my way to the next chord. Let's do it again. Here I go to the C. So somehow I have to figure, how am I going to get there? So if I'm up here, and I've got 4 more beats, I could go 1, 2, 3, 4, and land, or 1, 2, 3, 4. There's no rule per se about how you're going to get there, but it's just important to realize that you are going to get there. So if you're in G, you should also look at what are the real passing tones. In this case, like an E flat is going to be a note that doesn't necessarily belong to the chord, so we're going to pass through that quickly. There's no better way to use passing tones than in a walking bass, because you could play chromatically like this. But you have to get to the C, and here I am with it to go, so I'll jump down to the G. So as long as you keep in your mind where you're going, and you just keep walking in the right direction, you can create this kind of bass. People very often come up to me and say, well, how do you develop independence of the hands? Not necessarily independence of the fingers, but how do you do one thing with the left hand and another thing with the right? Well, this is something that's very important as a keyboard player, so you can do things like play a bass part and play a separate melody harmony section with the right hand. And what I did to develop my independence is developed an exercise that's kind of like a mixture of independence of the hands and also an ear training exercise. Basically, what you want to do is to be able to connect your thought process, or even like your musical ear, to your fingers. And how do you do that? Well, a big part of that is actually singing, whether that's out loud, which I recommend, or to yourself. So here's what we're going to do. Try this. Let's take a very simple bass line, like just D, A, D, A, just like that. Now you'll probably want to try this with a click, so that will make you feel very stable and very comfortable. And play it until you really feel like it's rock solid and you can't go wrong. Then, in the right hand, begin playing a melody. At first, don't make big skips like, because probably what will happen is you'll disconnect your ear mind to your hand. But if you play scalular, like and you'll know at home when you're on top of it and when you're kind of losing it, because you'll just feel it. So a very comfortable tempo, and sing while you play, and play up and down. Don't make big skips, and just try it. You might say, oh, that doesn't sound right. And you're also your own judge. What sounds good, what doesn't? Maybe you're into some Arabian scales or something, and you want to go that might sound fine to you. So be your own judge and go slow. Also, it would be good to practice this with a drum beat, like I have one right here ready to go. So it'll keep you really steady. We're going to have a number of different bass lines for you to try on my website, so I encourage you to go take a look and check it out. Let's look at a couple more right now while we're here. How about trying this one? So if you're more advanced, you can try a pattern in 7, like this one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And get it very steady and keep doing it. And then add your right hand. And don't be afraid to sing because nobody's around, hopefully, at your house. So that's the kind of thing I recommend. Very steady, very slow at first, a tempo that you can really do it, and then slowly increase your tempo. And this should gain you a lot of ear-to-hand coordination and also independence of the hands. One of the things that's very important in keyboard playing, or on any instrument, is having a technique. And to develop a technique, it's kind of like a sport in the sense that it's a very physical thing. And to be able to make music on a keyboard, you're going to have a lot of control of your hands. There's just no avoiding that. First of all, you want to make that connection between your ear and hands. And if you want your hand to play exactly what you're hearing in your head, your hand better be well equipped to do that. There's a number of things we can look at concerning technique. And the first thing I want to point out is that your main goal is to be able to have enough strength in your finger so that you can keep your arm quiet. You see too many players who play along and there's a lot of motion. But usually to do a riff, you don't necessarily need to be moving around at all with your arm. It's just your finger that's going to actually make the motion. So to be able to do that, you have to get some finger strength. And to get finger strength, you have to practice things that will give you independence of the fingers. Now, I myself practice not only on the keyboard, but I'll also practice on my knee, or I'll practice on a tabletop. And some of the exercises that I'll show you, you can do anywhere. Of course, there's very standard exercises, like things like this one. And all these things are good, but what people forget is that when you're playing these, first of all, you should play them to a metronome so it's very steady. But second of all, you should also change the rhythm of them, because if you're always accenting, accent, what happens to the other fingers? What about the pinky of your right hand? What I used to do, and still do sometimes, is if I'm playing something like that, I'll go like this. To give some extra attention to the fingers that we know are weaker. For instance, we know that trilling with 3 and 4, or even if you try that, you're going to find that perhaps trilling with 1 and 2 is going to be a lot smoother than 3 and 4, if at this point you can do that at all. So let's take a look at a couple of different exercises. First of all, I like to apply the rhythm method to technique. And what that means to me is that you can take 3 notes. Let's say these 3 notes. And by applying a rhythm to that, like a beat of 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So you're playing quarter note, then eighth notes. 2, 3, quarter, eighth, 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 quarter. And what's happening here, you'll notice, is that first we're accenting the C, C, E, D, C, E. Now try it in a 4 count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And it'll work with any 3-note pattern. How about if we take these fingers and go 1, 2, 3, just that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.